of y'all might know a little bit about that. It was not for a celebration like today. I was here to testify before what I can only describe to you as, and I hope they listening, a clown show. And as clown shows go, it was led by a clown. I understand the same clown that led my questioning was just gifted bunny ears. Some of y'all know the significance of that. Some of y'all don't. But he was gifted these bunny ears by Representative Rua Romanian. She was responding to a hateful, racist video that he had recently posted. She told him she gave him the bunny ears because she understood he was into that type of thing. Word on the street is, allegedly, he got some strange furry habits. The Senate hearing was a great waste of taxpayers' money and time. The Senate hearing was not about getting answers for Georgians as they lied and told people, but rather it was a desperate attempt to get their own name in the paper. See, they got to keep my name in their mouth for people to even know who they are. See, these want-to-be leaders, they have no ideas for Georgians, no plans to make Georgians' lives better. They want to show you that they are powerful and strong by coming after me. Let me tell you what they ended up showing in December. That they're stupid, that they're weak. And if y'all don't mind me saying so, they got a classic ass kicking while they got drugged for 3 hours.
I am so confused. The national Target boycott did not end. So why are all these outlets saying that it did? Let's back up a little bit. A quick Google search will show you 2 different things started last year. A 40-day Target fast started on March 5th, which was Ash Wednesday. It galvanized the clergy and church community to boycott Target. The national Target boycott started a month earlier on February 1st and has continued without interruption. So the leader of the 40-day fast that ended last April said he's now ending the boycott too.
We have not been able to get all that we have desired, but I am grateful for the strides that we have made.
But the 3 founders in Minnesota, where Target is headquartered and where the national Target boycott started, say they're still holding the line.
Don't be fooled. The Target boycott continues. It continues because the demands have yet to be met, and it continues because we are winning.
So the national Target boycott started on February 1st in Minneapolis by NEKIMA, Jaylani, and Monique. Then a month later, the 40-day Target fast started on March 5th by Pastor Jamal, who is the one now calling for the end of the boycott. But the question remains, how can you end something you admitted you didn't start?
Y'all not gonna like this, but it's things that make you go, And NEKIMA Levi-Armstrong, for historical record, is the one who started the Target boycott. She called for accountability for this Fortune 500 company in the city that Target is located in. The same company that is harboring ICE agents, who is using their parking lots for them to set up. The same organization that pledged $2 billion and still have not turned over the receipts. The same company who the day after the inauguration of President Donald John Trump withdrew its position on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she's the first one they get arrested. Super bad sister.
I am so confused. The national...
We're okay. Good morning and welcome to Let It Be Known. And let me just say, we are all confused about this situation. But we're going to have NEKIMA Levy Armstrong join us this morning. And I see she's in the back. Can we bring her in? Let's just get to it, Greer. No need to waste time. Good morning.
Good morning, Neo. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for being here. Let's just get straight to it. We saw the video a few weeks ago. You know, Jamal Bryant giving you credit for starting the boycott. But we also saw him use the moment to try to slide into the conversations about churches and churches being raided. And so once again, he's used something that you've done and tried to co-opt it. He got no traction for when the white man went in his church. He tried to get attention for that. It failed. And now we have another situation where yesterday, in the wee hours of the morning, he decided to hold a press conference and fly himself to Washington, D.C., okay, to have this press conference. And so let's just talk about it. What was your response when you first heard that he was having this press conference?
Well, honestly, I found out because I got a breaking news alert through our hometown newspaper, the Star Tribune, which is located in Minneapolis, saying that there was an end to the Target boycott. Now, I'm sitting here as one of the 3 founders of the Target boycott thinking, how can there be an end to the Target boycott when we didn't call for an end to the Target boycott? Target has not addressed our key demands, the first being to reverse its decision to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion, which Target announced in January of 2025 after political pressure from the Trump administration. Because as you know, Niel, January of 2025 was when Donald Trump began his second term as president of the United States. And right away, he began attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Target was one of the first companies to bow down or capitulate to Donald Trump by making this announcement, which many of us saw as a slap in the face. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we responded by launching this national boycott. So to have someone who does not live here, who was not responsible for launching or organizing the boycott, hold a press conference in Washington, D.C., because they know they're not welcome here, in the Twin Cities, calling for the end to a boycott that we started, was in many ways shocking, but at the same time, not shocking, based on what we've dealt with over the last year.
You know what, though? You brought up a good point right now. Like, he went to D.C. Why didn't he come to Minneapolis? That's where the headquarters are. That's where you want to, make this celebration that is over. And he also mentioned that Target's new belonging program is essentially DEI under a new name. Now, you've called this crumbs. What is the fundamental difference between what Target is offering and the actual justice that the coalition is demanding?
Well, for those who don't know why it's so significant that Target is headquartered in Minneapolis and that we called for the start of the boycott in Minneapolis, it's because of Target's longstanding reputation in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, as a hometown company, that has donated money in the past. They have a store actually on Lake Street, right across the street from the 3rd Precinct police station. That's the police station that the 4 officers worked out of who were responsible for murdering George Floyd in 2020. So Target saw, what happened in our community with the uprising. They saw the 4th Precinct go up the 3rd Precinct police station go up in flames. Mm-hmm. As a response to the murder of George Floyd. And they saw us, in despair, in our community after literally witnessing a murder of a Black man at the hands of Minneapolis police. And of course, the world witnessed what happened. And so Target understood, or at least we thought, the significance of that pain and that trauma. And in 2021, as we were attending the trials for Derek Chauvin, the main officer responsible for killing George Floyd, still taken to the streets, that's when Target decided to show itself as a national leader on these issues by making a racial justice pledge. So in 2021, Target pledged 2.1 billion towards 4 things: improving the Black customer shopping experience,
Okay.
getting more Black brands on the shelves, improving their hiring and promotion practices for Black employees, and improving their supplier diversity network, right? They also would normally participate in reporting around how they are doing with regard to specific diversity measures for the LGBTQIA community. So these were, initiatives that Target had a pledge to advance, as a part of their racial equity work. Then, like I said, suddenly in January of 2025, they became one of the first companies to turn their backs on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in their initial statement, they talked about this so-called belonging program. Right back then, why that's being brought up now as a concession by Jamal Bryant makes absolutely no sense. Because we said then this belonging initiative is ambiguous. Nobody can even define what it actually means. And it's not the same as tracking and measuring progress around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right?
It was right. It was all types of headlines coming out yesterday, and then we also saw Tamika Mallory and Nina Turner. Well, first the flyer came out; it was just him on there, right? He came out; he's having a press conference. Then a few hours later, Tamika Mallory posted it, and she was on the left, and Nina Turner was on the right, or vice versa. And then they were there. But then after the press conference, after he said the boycott was over, Tamika Mallory came out with another statement and said that she's still 10 toes down with Minneapolis and Washington, D.C. Then Nina Turner said that she's still down with the boycott in her own terms. So it's so confusing that Jamal Bryant would end the boycott. They're still saying the boycott is on. And then Roland Martin jumps into the conversation on Georgia Ford's post. And he says, Strike for All also began their Target boycott. That group is led by Nina Turner. She asked Tamika Mallory and Until Freedom to join her. What is your response to that?
This is the cleanup crew, right? This is what you would call CYA, cover your you know what. So if we go back to the beginning regarding how all of this unfolded, the reality is that once we found out that Target was planning to reverse course on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and actually this was brought to my attention by one of the co-founders of the Target boycott, because there are 3 of us. So it's myself, it's Monique Colors Doty, who is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Minnesota and a longtime advocate in the community. Right. It's Shaylani Hussein, who is the executive director of CARE Minnesota. Again, he's a Somali man, been on the front lines for a long time, calling for racial justice and police accountability. So Monique, on the very same day that the Target press release or announcement was made, Monique texted me like, did you see this? So I'm looking at this announcement, just shook, like, Target, how could you be one of the first companies to capitulate to Donald Trump when you had made your store so welcoming, at least in theory, to Black folks and other people of color, to women, to, et cetera. And so Monique sends me this. So the next morning, I took to Facebook and I let my network know. My network is very engaged on racial justice and social justice issues. And I said, this is what happened yesterday with Target putting out this announcement. What should we do to hold this company accountable? So people started responding in the comments. I'm cutting up my red card. I'm not going back to Target anymore. And there was a sister named Leslie Taylor who said we should do a Target blackout, and I said, I love that idea. And so, but I said we should do a boycott. So I went back to Monique and Jaylani, and told them what my network said. And we all agreed, let's call for a nationwide indefinite boycott of Target. So around the same time, maybe a day or two later, I get a call from one of my former law students who is also an organizer, and at the time who was friends with Tamika Mallory.
Okay.
So she calls me saying, you know, Tamika Mallory wants to connect with you all, you know, regarding what you're doing around, you know, Target, you know, and their announcement. Will you hop on a call, you know, with Tamika and some other national folks who want to support what you all are doing? So I skeptically and reluctantly got on a call with them, and on the call was Tamika Mallory, who I had met before. We weren't friends, but you know, I had met her before. So it's Tamika Mallory, it was Nina Turner, Jamal Bryant, Linda Sarsour, who works with Tamika Mallory and who was part of the Women's March when they were part of the leadership there. And there were 2 or 3 other young Black male ministers, one of whom I knew, a young man by the name of Stephen Green, who had come to Minneapolis in 2015. So they're all on the call, and Tamika saying, you know, we want to support you all. Leslie has sent them our press release that laid out all the talking points, our quotes, connecting Black history to this boycott, connecting George Floyd to this boycott and our community. And one of the first things that Tamika Mallory says is, thank you for your clarity. Because our press release laid it all out. It gave all the talking points, you know, and so we had a conversation around, you know, creating this mothership where they were supposed to be helping to amplify our efforts nationally. And then what happened after that was, you know, literally maybe a week or two. So then we had our press conference.
Right.
At the end of January, announcing in front of Target's headquarters that the boycott would begin on February 1st to coincide with Black History Month. So they got our press release, watched our press conference. That night, Nina Turner goes on, guess who? Roland Martin's show. And while she's on Roland Martin's show, first of all, none of us talked about them going on these shows, you know, and representing the boycott. But she goes on the show, you know, talking about her organization and claiming that she had activists on the ground in Minneapolis. Apparently, she was talking about us. And we're thinking, like, we don't work for you. Why would you go on this show? And right away, the same night that we do our national press conference, which was covered by the Associated Press, along with many other publications, why would you go on this show and position yourself as a leader of this boycott? Right?
So that's where Roland Martin got that talking point from.
Yes.
Okay.
Went on the show because apparently her organization had put out some graphics or something, you know, but we were the folks who, like I said, we laid out everything out. We were the face of the boycott. So even some of the pictures that came out yesterday connected to their press conference that they called in DC had a picture of my daughter, my 8-year-old, holding a sign. This green sign said National Target Boycott, and an elder in our community. So because we were the face, you know.
Right. And so you had to correct them on that. You had to correct USA Today, and they had to retract and rewrite the story the best that they could to get the truth out instead of telling the narrative from Jamal Bryant. USA
Today and the Minnesota Star Tribune, like, we had to deal with media and set the record straight. So just fast forwarding a little bit. So she intentionally went on Roland Martin's show the night of our press conference to try to claim the narrative regarding the boycott.
Now, have you heard from Jamal Bryant, Tamika Mallory, Nina Turner, or Roland Martin?
Well, what happened after that? So after...
Oh, you want to go back? So we're going back.
So people understand, right?
Okay.
Just real quick, let me go back to help people. Like, this didn't just fully come out of nowhere, right? This was their plan, you know, unfortunately, to try to co-opt the boycott from day one. So so Nina goes on Roland Martin's show. He grills her, and then maybe a day or two later, Tamika Mallory goes on the Breakfast Club. She's supposed to be on there promoting her book. but 75 to 90% of the interview, she's talking about the Target boycott, right? Like, again, trying to take control of the narrative, even though, like, why are you spending all your time talking about the Target boycott? And so then after that, you see Jamal Bryant. So what had happened was, one day, as all of this is unfolding, I get a call out of the blue from Tamika saying that Jamal Bryant had set up a targetfast.org website, and that he was going to do a 40-day Target fast for the faith community. And I said, Target fast? I said, I don't understand. It's like, we've already launched a nationwide boycott that our community is participating in, allies are participating in, that's gaining a lot of traction. Why would he launch a 40-day fast? And then beyond, I said, I don't get it. I was like, I've never heard of a fast, you know, when we have a boycott going on. So then I go to the website and I see that he launches this fast as if there's no boycott going on. He doesn't mention that we have a boycott going on, doesn't mention Minneapolis, doesn't mention, you know, that we're supposedly trying to do a national coalition, nothing. It just looks like he's leading this effort, you know, by himself, essentially. And I see Kirk Franklin, you know, on the way, and I'm thinking, what is this? It had nothing to do with our purpose in launching the boycott. And so I called them out, you know, via text messages, text chain we were on. And I said, help me understand, why is there now a 40-day fast while we are in the midst of a national indefinite boycott of Target? I said, this will cause confusion. I said, it makes no sense. And what's supposed to happen after the 40 days? Like, are we expecting a company to just fold in 40 days and give in to the demands? And one of the other things that happened during that call with Tamika, where she told me about this, she asked me what our demands were. So I tell her what our demands are. When I look at that website, 2 of our demands are on that website. Wow. So they're doing all this sneaky stuff. And when I called it out, Tamika says she was on a flight, that Jamal would address my concerns. Well, turns out she was on a flight to head to New Birth, which is Jamal's church in Atlanta, in order to sell her books, which she did the next morning, right? She didn't tell us this. I find this out because that was when her Breakfast Club interview, you know, happened a day or 2 later. And that's when she revealed that. So after he launched his website, then he also hired a publicist, and he went to Roland Martin's show. He went to the Breakfast Club. He went to CNN to begin positioning himself as the leader of the national Target boycott. Not once did Tamika or Nina try to correct the record and tell the truth. And so I basically, you know, I let them know my concerns on this text loop with them. Then my former law student who had, you know, connected us
right
in the first place, she wound up going in on them because she saw that they were genuinely trying to co-opt the boycott.
And let's just say this too. This has been going on for a year. We've had you on the show several times talking about this situation. We've had you talking about at the core why it started in Minneapolis. And so this has been an ongoing battle. I mean, you've had conversations with Reverend Al Sharpton when he went to Target. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what came out of that?
Yeah, so last summer, if you guys recall, there was a headline in the midst, because we just kept going, right? Even though it was frustrating, we came on your show to set the record straight, but we just continued organizing regarding the boycott. Then suddenly out of the blue last summer, we see headlines saying that Reverend Al Sharpton met with the CEO of Target, a man by the name of Brian Cornell at the time. And we're looking, thinking, what does Reverend Al Sharpton have to do with this boycott? And why would he be meeting with the CEO when he has not been involved? If you remember, Reverend Al Sharpton had a Costco strategy where he was bringing Black folks to Costco to get membership, which I thought, hey, that's a fine strategy because Costco is a good alternative for some people. but I never expected him to meet with the CEO of Target while we are in an active boycott led by the people who live in the community where Target is headquartered. So that wound up happening. And after Reverend Al Sharpton met with the CEO of Target, I suddenly get an almost frantic call from Roland Martin, basically saying he was going to launch a new national coalition. Would I join? Because apparently at that time, once everything happened with Al Sharpton, that's when they came forward to Roland Martin with the truth that we had actually launched the boycott in Minneapolis. And so so that's when Roland Martin reached out like, well, you know, I think what he thought was that Al Sharpton had tried to co-opt the boycott from Jamal Bryant in the same way Jamal, Tamika, and Nina had tried to do to us. So I'm just laughing about it. Like, you know, this is what y'all get. Y'all did the same thing to us, you know. Right. So I tell Roland, I was like, he said, I didn't know that you all, you know, had launched the boycott. I'm just now finding this out. So
you're talking about that's what Reverend Al Sharpton said.
Oh, that's what Roland Martin said. And so Roland Martin had said this, and I'm like, no, you know, they don't have integrity. We don't want to work with them anymore. And so the next thing you know, so that happened, right, which was very upsetting. But then there were mixed reports, if you remember at the time, some claiming Jamal Bryant was in that meeting with Reverend Al Sharpton and the CEO of Target, and some saying he wasn't. He wasn't in the picture because remember, there was a photo op that happened of Reverend Al Sharpton, a couple of his staff from NAN, and Brian Cornell. And at the time, we're like, this just causes confusion for our community to have a Black civil rights leader posing with the CEO of Target. So fast forward again to January of 2026. Now, of course, we're in the midst at this time of an ICE surge called Operation Metro Surge, where the Trump administration literally sent thousands of ICE agents into the Twin Cities, and they were wreaking havoc on our community, literally engaging in violence, etc. So we were involved in that advocacy around that because of, one, boots on the ground, you know, as organizers, but also the fact that Target had started allowing ICE agents to stage raids in their parking lots. And so we held a press conference about that. And we had found out that Reverend Al Sharpton wanted to come to Minneapolis. And I got a call about it, and I said, absolutely not, you know, and I laid out the reasons. One of the top.
Wait, you told Reverend Al Sharpton he couldn't come to Minneapolis.
I didn't tell him directly. I told the people who reached out to me to see if he could come. And I said no. And I let them know why. It's like, number one being this Target boycott issue. Why would he meet with the CEO while we have an active boycott going on? That was disrespectful. And I laid out the reasons. And then we put out a press release saying we do not want these so-called national leaders coming to Minneapolis unless we invite you. And that includes Reverend Al Sharpton, Jamal Bryant, Nina Turner, and Tamika Matter. We laid it out. So we've sent out this press release specifically with Reverend Al Sharpton's name, but saying we don't, no, unless we invite you, do not come here. So he apparently got the message. And by that night, after our press conference where I named all four of them that I just referenced, I get a text from one of Reverend Al Sharpton's people asking for a call with me. So I get on a call. I go ahead, reluctantly get on a call with him. I lay out the reasons why we said no to Reverend Al Sharpton coming to Minnesota. And he tries to explain, you know, their perspective. And he winds up putting Reverend Al Sharpton on the line. And we have a conversation starting with what happened with the Target boycott and why he would agree to meet with Brian Cornell. And Reverend Al Sharpton said that Brian Cornell had reached out to him asking him to meet. And he said, I won't meet with you without the organizers of the Target boycott, which in his mind was Jamal Bryant.
Right.
So Jamal Bryant, and he told him also, I will only meet in New York at my office. So Jamal Bryant and Brian Cornell flew to New York for this meeting with Al Sharpton. And when it got time for them to take the picture, Jamal Bryant, according to Reverend Al Sharpton, jumped out of the picture. He didn't want to be in the picture because he had not told the truth to Nina Turner and Tamika Mallory about even being at that meeting. He didn't want them to know that he had gotten involved in a meeting with Al Sharpton and with Brian Cornell. So he lied to Roland Martin and he lied to Joy Reid, both of whom, according to Al Sharpton, contacted him going off, thinking that he had double-crossed Jamal Bryant. And Reverend Al Sharpton said, Jamal Bryant was in that meeting. I have a picture of him in my office. But that had been the catalyst for why Roland Martin contacted me, because he was, in my opinion, trying to take the power back from Al Sharpton, apparently. And so, like I said, at the time I told Roland Martin, absolutely not. They don't have integrity. I am not ever working with any of them again. Right?
So what does this say though? I mean, we're talking about leadership. We're talking about Black men, and we see, Black women, even including Tamika Mallory and Nina Turner, being left out of important conversations and movements that they're the face of. What does that say to you? And what has happened to you? This isn't the first time that Black men in leadership have co-opted, campaigns, have co-opted, movement. What does that say to you, or how does that make you feel?
Well, one, I have a little violin playing for Tamika Mallory and Nina Turner. Listen, they're not the face of anything other than whatever they have going on. Because look, these people have bigger platforms, right, than us in the Twin Cities. We don't seek all this. We just be on the ground, 10 toes down, fighting for our people. But with all these big platforms these people have, all this access to celebrities, position themselves as celebrities, whatever. Why do you have to come to, theoretically speaking, little old Minneapolis and piggyback off of our work if you really got it like that? So I have a little violin playing for those two, because at any point in time, they could have stood up for us as Black women. 2 of the 3 original founders of the Target boycott are Black women. They knew this, and they knew that we have been boots on the ground. My co-founder, Monique Cullors Doty, got into this movement for Black lives because the St. Paul police killed her nephew, Marcus Golden, in January of 2015. So she wasn't planning on being an activist. She got involved after that happened to her nephew. Then she started working on behalf of other families who had lost loved ones to police violence. I've been doing police accountability work since 2005, back when I was a law professor at the University of St. Thomas, running a civil rights legal clinic, holding departments accountable, right? So this, for us, this is a lifestyle. This isn't just throw our name on a boycott or, no, this is for real. We're really about this life. So to have Black women involved with trying to co-opt a movement built on blood, sweat, and tears in our community was just disheartening and also disgusting, because they could have put Jamal Bryant in his place then, but they chose to double down and do what they did. And so that part really bothers me, because as Black women, we have dealt with erasure historically. Think about the fact that because of Claudette Colvin, 15-year-old Black teenage girl, refused to give up her seat on a bus in Alabama. Then you have Rosa Parks, December 1st, 1955, refused to give up her seat, got arrested, helped activate the other Black women in the community who organized in the churches. And that led to the emergence of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all these men who we see as the face of the civil rights movement, even though it was the Black women doing the heavy lifting, organizing behind the scenes. At the 1963 March on Washington, those Black women walking arm in arm got sent down a separate street from Dr. King and the other men so that the men would be the ones in the photo ops, right? Why don't we know these women's names, faces, or stories? Because this erasure of Black women's leadership and our labor and our ingenuity is systematic. So again, to have Black women involved in it is just a real slap in the face, and it's disheartening. Am I surprised that some of these men jump out in front of Black women in modern day history? No, that's what they were taught from the 50s and 60s, and they still think that it's okay. It's a patriarchal perspective, even from some Black male leaders in our community. But then you got Black men like Jelani Hussein, one of our co-founders, who stands 10 toes down beside and behind the leadership of Black women. He is Somali. We're native-born African-American, but this man stands 10 toes down for our community when we are calling out police violence, when we're calling out our government. He is right there by our side. So it's not, thankfully, it's not all, Black male leaders.
Right.
But unfortunately, there is this patriarchal attitude, and Jamal Bryant has this attitude because he said during this time, as he was trying to co-opt the boycott, he talked about the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement was primarily led by 3 Black women. He didn't like that. He thought it should be the church, leading on these issues. I'm like, well, I didn't tell him this at the time, but I'm an ordained reverend. I've been an ordained reverend since 2016. I've been a preacher since 2007. Monique is a deacon in her church. And Jelani Hussein is Muslim, but he's very religiously devout. So you have the church leading in our own way. And it didn't take, a Black male pastor out in front in order for us to help build some traction around every movement, that we have been involved in. So people need to understand this wasn't accidental. This was very much intentional, with regard to how this co-opting happened and how it led to yesterday, as we said in the beginning, them flying to Washington, D.C., to the National Press Club and having a joint press conference between the 3 of them. And so now, because of the backlash, you have Tamika and Nina, saying, I'm still boycotting. Well, why were you?
It just makes no sense. It makes no sense. But I want to give the chat. They have some questions for you, so I want to give them some time. Mike V says, Grand Rising NEKIMA. What exactly are these folks gaining from their efforts after your economic boycott?
Well, number one, notoriety, right? People knew them. But think about what's happened since that time. You have Jamal Bryant on all these news stations, speaking as the voice of the Black community, regarding this boycott. And as a matter of fact, as we started continually calling him out and letting people know that this man is not the leader of this boycott or the founder or anything, he did a 40-day fast, which came and went. From that point, remember, he tried to call for a boycott of Dollar General or something, an Atlanta company, and it went nowhere. Nobody followed that particular boycott, but he thought he had enough, clout and, I guess, standing in our community to just randomly call a boycott. It didn't work. But since that time, what do we have? The Route 100 gave them an award as 3 of the Route 100. Right off of the Target boycott. You had them showing up, at least Tamika Mallory, at the Congressional Black Caucus. Because remember, the Congressional Black Caucus picked this up as an issue that they campaigned on, not knowing it started in Minneapolis. Then, from my understanding, I heard that they received an NAACP Image Award as well. At least Jamal Bryant did, as a result.
He did.
He got an NAACP award off of the Target boycott that he did not start. So think about that. That is a lot of social capital, cultural capital, awards. And I would say the most dangerous thing that happened during that time is him being allowed at the negotiating table on behalf of Black America. It is very dangerous to have someone who lacks integrity, willing to lie as a pastor out in the open, willing to co-opt a movement he did not start and manipulate the truth at the negotiating table for Black America. And think about the outcome of that. You're at the negotiating table. You don't get any of what we're really asking for. So what do? Call a press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., selling out our community and claiming the boycott is over. Who in their right minds would do that? We were winning. We are winning.
That's right.
This
we
is
are
the
winning.
most unified our community has been in years. And this is arguably the most successful, if not one of them, right? Economic boycotts in American history, led by Black people. So to have us unified, to have our allies standing with us, you even had the Latino freeze that happened after we launched the boycott. You had the Tesla takedown. You had these waving, these rolling economic boycotts that started happening because we taught people how to use the power of our dollar, to apply pressure and to hold corporations accountable. And I was so proud of that, to see our people actively participating. And think about the fact that it was women, right? Of course, we had men participating in the boycott, but women have the purse strings in most families to decide how to use the discretionary income that we have, right? And so it took women from all backgrounds making a decision. I'm not going to spend this money at Target. I'm going to shop small. I'm going to shop local. I'm going to shop Black women owned. I'm going to shop immigrant owned. I'm not going to shop at Target. That took a lot of restraint for Black women in particular who coined Target as Target.
Me.
We were in there. Our children was the next generation of Target shoppers. So that meant something that we band together.
Right. And it still means something. And I saw yesterday, we were going back and forth and we were watching. I know I was watching a lot of the chats with this story breaking on all the different Black media outlets. And people were like, I'm still boycotting. I'm not going back to Target. And that's happening a lot in the chat too. They're saying they're not going back. Orange G says, I'm riding with NEKIMA on this one. And if people really paid attention to the Black press, they would know NEKIMA is telling the truth. Now, I want to know from you, it's been almost 24 hours. Have you heard from Roland Martin, Tamika Mallory, Nina Turner, Jamal Bryant? Have you heard from any of them?
I have not heard from any of them, and I don't expect to, because like I said, once I saw what they were up to, I let them know that this was unacceptable. I let them know to their faces via text. I'm like, you all lack integrity. Like, this is not right. And I really felt disheartened for our community because we've been through a lot in Minneapolis.
You have. And let's go there, though. Let's go there because I think it's important for people to know that, you could have a press conference and walk away. Okay. But you are actually in Minneapolis. You were recently targeted and arrested in connection with the city's church protest. Okay. So you still have that weight on your shoulder.
We're both facing federal charges for a church protest that we held in January at City's Church in St. Paul. There are 39 of us who've been indicted by the Trump administration because we went in, and including, Georgia Fort, who is an independent journalist who I know you have interviewed on your show. She's from the Twin Cities. She's a Black woman and mother who covers a lot of our activism. And then Don Lemon, who flew in that day, to cover the protest, who also wound up being indicted. And so it was literally a nonviolent, peaceful protest at a church that has as one of its pastors, the regional director of ICE in Minnesota and 3 or 4 other states. So this is the person who oversaw the conduct of these ICE agents who during Operation Metro Surge, which is literally the largest deployment of ICE agents in history, who descended upon Minnesota, invaded Minnesota, beginning in, I believe, December. And it resulted in Renee Good being murdered at the hands of ICE agent Jonathan Ross. And then 2 days after our arrest, Alex Preddy was murdered by 2 Border Patrol agents. And so when we went into that church, you know, we didn't storm the church like, you know, these right-wing people say. We actually sat in the service, participated in the service. And the pastor, part of his prayer was, please chasten us, O Lord, and help us to get our house in order. And then he finished his prayer. We all said amen. And after that, I stood up and I started walking towards him. And I said, excuse me, Pastor, did you just pray this particular prayer? And he said, yes. And I said, well, he said, correct. I said, well, help me understand, how is David Easterwood a pastor here, but also serving as the director of ICE in St. Paul? Because as the director, he's overseeing the conduct of these ICE agents. Again, killing people, beating people, breaking in people's homes, kicking down doors, pulling guns on people. Right before this church protest, there was an African-American, native-born African-American family driving through a neighborhood where ICE had just shot somebody, a Venezuelan national, and people gathered over there. This family's driving from a basketball game. ICE deploys military-grade weapons at this vehicle, hits them with flashbang grenades and tear gas, and they have their children in the car with them. 6 children, I believe. Their 6-month-old baby loses consciousness because of the tear gas and almost dies. And the mother's on the phone with 911, Black mother, learning how to, basically restore her baby, resuscitate her baby so her baby wouldn't die. And then they had to take 2 or 3 of their other kids to the emergency room because they have asthma. So this was affecting real people. And to have an ICE director also serving as a pastor, what? Where does that happen?
And let's just talk about, you know, who this church is connected to, you know, and the bigger conversation of white supremacy and the leadership within this church and the church down south and the church in DC. So like we talk about AME and CME, well, this is white supremacy church, okay, that they're all going to. And I want to touch on that because all of that still ties back and is connected to Target, how they have. And so this boycott is really stemming from movement work. Yeah, not just chosen and
not
ground
just
zero.
hiring a PR person, right?
It's Minneapolis. It's Minneapolis. And I want to talk about too. We're talking about, you know, a Target boycott. We're talking about the leadership behind, the real leadership behind it. But I also want you to talk about the toll it takes, the death threats that you get. You know, protection of your family, how sometimes you might not be able to be at home because the situation is hot. Talk to us about, you know, that and the mental toll it may take on you, and why all of this is relative to somebody having a press conference yesterday and stopping a movement and when you're really trying to change situations and communities.
Absolutely. And people here know who we are and what we do, right? We've led so many marches and demonstrations. We put our bodies on the line. We've been arrested. You know, I faced charges after a Mall of America demonstration that happened in December of 2014, you know, in solidarity with the people in Ferguson, in New York, in Ohio, as people were being killed by police and the Black Lives Matter movement was just beginning. So even with that demonstration in January of 2015, 11 of us were charged as organizers. I faced 8 misdemeanors, you know, during that time. They were really trying to come for me as a lawyer, as a law professor. And we fought those charges for almost a year before they were dismissed by the same judge who actually oversaw the Derek Chauvin trial. So this has been a long history of us putting our bodies on the line, our lives on the line, making the sacrifices that are needed on behalf of our community, standing 10 toes down, facing retaliation, being excluded, You know, the list go, we tired, but we're still out there putting in the work on behalf of our people, pouring into young folks that we meet on the front lines, right? All of that is a part of our work. And that's why when the world saw after George Floyd was killed, we were ready, right? That's how we mobilized so quickly. We had already been going out, handing out masks to the Black community. We would be stationed at a local grocery store in the parking lot that has shut down during COVID. And we'd have lines of people, Black people, coming to get free cloth masks for them and their children to try to protect them. So we had already been putting ourselves on the line, you know, showing up in our community, making sure, because we like the government is not going to protect Black people. So we asked allies, while you're making masks for hospital staff, make masks for Black folks, because we know that we're susceptible to COVID. You know, we already face all these health challenges. So we have been out there for weeks handing out masks. So when George Floyd was killed, even though it was a pandemic, I was up in the middle of the night talking to an ally, asking her, will you help me plan the first protest calling for justice for George Floyd? We didn't know if people were going to show up because it was COVID, but we knew we were going to show up, and we were going to take the risks associated with making sure that this man got justice and that these police officers who killed him were held accountable. You know, and as a matter of fact, if you go back to George Floyd, our police chief, Madeira Arredondo, first Black police chief in Minneapolis, he didn't even know George Floyd had been killed by his officers. He thought it was a medical emergency. But another organizer whose husband had been killed by police tagged me in a Facebook post that day saying Minneapolis police killed somebody by choking them or crushing their throat. After I looked online, I didn't see anything about it. I called the chief myself and asked him, did MPD kill someone today? He said, no, Miss NEKIMA, they didn't kill anyone today. Somebody died as a result of a medical emergency. And I said, are you sure? Because that's not what the community's saying. Have you seen video of the incident? And he said, no, I sent it to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I said, you need to see some video immediately, because that's not what the community is saying. And this is the Black community, our community. Right. You know, and so, and then I went online, told people that something happened. So what Ashley said, this is what the chief said, we need to see some video. Then I was tagged in the video that was taken by 17-year-old Darnella Frazier, a young Black woman who had seen our movement. She has seen us taken to the streets, calling out the police violence against our community, holding vigils, shutting things down, documenting, because we have a huge independent journalism, you know, cohort of folks.
Right. Toussaint Morrison, Georgia Ford, On-Site Media. It's a lot of, and this is how we find out, and this is how we get the truth from the boots on the ground, independent journalism. So we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I wanted for folks to get a sense of how is Minneapolis doing now? We see headlines that the Trump administration says we're pulling out. What's happening on the streets of Minneapolis right now?
Well, I would say that we started to experience a decrease in the number of ICE agents that were here in Minnesota. And that's because as the world now knows, right, we're about that life in Minnesota. We tried to show people in 2020, they didn't see it. Apparently they thought it was one and done, but this movement has been building, you know, for over a decade of us being boots on the ground. So you saw this silent army, this invisible army that suddenly, you know, started showing up outside of where ICE was housed. People, you know, marches, 50 to 100,000 people, you know, showing up at marches. You saw us as Black leaders calling out the federal government in solidarity with our immigrant community and calling out the harm and abuse. Why? Because it was reminiscent of slave catchers and what we know has happened in our community at the hands of law enforcement. And that, again, is what led to the church protests that, you know, people know nationally happened. And 39 of us are facing charges. There's other people facing federal charges as well for standing up to the federal government. So we're dealing with the aftermath of all of that. But there are people in the suburbs who are dealing with ICE still showing up at people's doors. So they're quieter now than they were when they had over 3,000 agents in the Twin Cities. They're down to somewhere between 400 and 600 agents, but the norm for them is about 150 agents. So we're still dealing with ICE, you know, in the Twin Cities. And people are actually, one of the things that happened was people setting up mutual aid networks, giving out free whistles so people could blow their whistles if ICE came in the community to warn immigrant neighbors not to leave their homes. People set up food networks, just like we did during COVID, to make sure that families who couldn't leave their homes had food that they needed and resources, right? And so our community is still very close-knit in the aftermath of this ICE surge that we dealt with. And we're still calling out the Trump administration, the federal government, and Target Corporation, because on February 1st, we let people know we're entering year 2 of this nationwide Target boycott, because Target has not reversed its decision to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion. They have been unapologetic. They've tried all these tactics. You remodeling their stores, bringing different brands in, making their employees smile more. They think all these things are going to get us to return to Target. And we said, absolutely not. You aligned yourself with an authoritarian regime and turned your backs on your most loyal customers. We are not going back into Target. That was our stance and still is our stance, even with these folks, namely Jamal Bryant, Tamika Mallory, and Nina Turner having this press conference yesterday. And like you said, Niel, you know, Jamal Bryant called for an end to the Target for no reason. The Target boycott is working, right? And I want to just run down the effects so far. Okay. People who may not have been paying attention. Target has lost over $15 billion in their valuation as a company. They've taken reputational hits since the start of this boycott. They've had to replace their CEO, Brian Cornell, with a new CEO. And before he was uprooted from that position and placed on the board as the board chair, he lost millions of dollars in compensation behind this boycott. They've had months of declining foot traffic since the start of this boycott. Their stock prices have declined significantly since the start of this boycott. So this boycott is successful. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be having people trying to co-opt it. We wouldn't be having people in Washington, D.C. trying to act like they're running the boycott and calling for an end to it. Why would anyone do that when it is successful? When our people understand the value of us sticking together and using the power of the purse and being disciplined. Because you don't know how many people after we launched this boycott who got in my inbox or got in our comments, well, what about Walmart? What about Amazon? What about, and we're like, listen, God told us focus on Target. We're focusing on Target. If you want to focus on these other companies, you do that. We're doing what God called us to do. And we wanted to be able to measure the results of all of us sticking together. And that is what we have seen. That's why Target is scared. That's why they're desperate. That's why they got Jamal Bryant to try to call off the boycott. But the devil is a liar. The boycott is still going on. It's still going strong. It represents the power of the people.
I think that is a perfect way to close out. And I wanted to give you this time because I know a lot of times when networks call, they give you a 5-minute hit, right? And that's not how you tell the story and you get to the bottom of the truth. So we wanted to give you this time this morning to just let it all out. And I hope that you feel like you have done that. And most importantly, we wanted the people to know that the boycott is still on, it's still strong, and we're not going back to Target, okay? No matter what the pastors say. So as you know, you always have, no, he doesn't. You always have a home here. You're always welcome to come on the show. We appreciate you taking this time to share your thoughts with us. And we'll be back tomorrow, family, with more news, more views, and opinions right here on the Black Press Morning Show. Thank you, NEKIMA.
Thank you, Nia. I appreciate you.